I'd like to welcome the panel up this morning for our first panel discussion. And before I get started, I want to just thank all of you out there, not only the participants here in the room, but those that may be watching on the video teleconference. We couldn't do this without all of your support. And what we're doing today is taking a look at how we can take this Army even further. 91% of our military occupational specialties are open, you heard. That's a remarkable achievement, but we have a few more to go. So today is about forging our future. And Cody, how are you? Forging our future and taking a look at what it is, those key issues of transition. What is the difference between the military culture and the civilian culture, and how do we help people integrate? Our first panel this morning is composed of four wonderful people. Some I've known for some time, some I think I should have known at some time in my past, and all very involved in transitioning individuals from the military into the civilian life. I'm going to give a brief bio, but as you heard, we have an emergency preparedness initiative going on here today, and no plan survives first contact with the enemy, so we'll see what happens. But we're going to truncate our remarks to just 4 minutes, so very pithy remarks from our speakers here. But I'll give you a brief background. You'll see their brief bio in your program. Our first speaker will be Major General Marcia Anderson. She's currently the Deputy Chief of the Army Reserve, IMA. IMA is Individual Mobilization Augmentee. That person in the reserve, their primary job is to be ready to deploy at a moment's notice for any contingency required. So as the Deputy Chief of the Army Reserve, she is there to support any deployment required and does duties assigned. She's also a clerk of bankruptcy court in the Western District of Wisconsin in the United States courts. She received her bachelor's degree in political science from Creighton University and a JD from Rutgers. Our next speaker will be Ronald Drock. Yeah, I thought I had it right. Mr. Drock's a veteran of Vietnam. We served in the same area while we were there many, many years ago. He's been involved and a big supporter of legislative change to support our veterans. He served as the Director of Government and Legislative Affairs at the U.S. Department of Labor, Veterans Employment and Training Services, and for issues related to the Department of Defense, Department of Labor, and Veterans Affairs. He works extensively with the disabled American veterans and has helped our veterans in their transition. Our next speaker will be Command Sergeant Major Cynthia Pritchard, retired. She has served 36 years during her career in the military, something I share with her, long time. Currently, she is the Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies Liaison to U.S. Central Command. She's served in multiple positions throughout her career, as you can imagine, and is a graduate of the United States Army Sergeant Major's Academy and Excelsior College, and currently pursuing a master's degree. It just never ends. She's also a member of J.P. Morgan Chase Military and Veterans Advisory Council. And our final speaker on today's first panel is former Sergeant Amy Wilkerson. She's the Assistant Store Manager for Home Depot in Baltimore. Amy comes to us as the Assistant Manager for Home Depot, where she is part of the leadership team, and as she did in the military, drives leadership and inspires others to achieve their goals. She's a United States Marine Corps Sergeant, so we are all service here today. Good morning. Thank you, Amy. So without further ado, let's move on to our panel. We are going to, as I mentioned, truncate this to 4 minutes each, and We will, if possible, allow for questions right after the panel, depending on whether we have this emergency situation under control.
Thank you, General Barbish. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the programs that currently exist in the Army Reserve, just to give you a little bit more of a sense of my duties. Besides being Deputy Chief Army Reserve, I've also been assigned to work for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs, beginning later this month, to work on issues and strategies related to continuum of service, which basically translates into trying to create an environment where we can have soldiers transition between any stage in their life, whether it's between active duty, Army Reserve, or National Guard, so that we can continue to capitalize on the skills and to leverage the training that those soldiers have received so that we can have them ready for any contingency. As women transition off of duty, or whether they've been mobilized as a Guard or reservists, we face some special situations and some special stresses that maybe our male counterparts do not. As you know, in most cases, women are and continue to be the primary caregiver in a family, whether it's for children or for our elderly parents. And so that adds another dimension, I think, to this particular transition between duty and coming back into civilian life. We have a number of programs that currently exist that I think assist in that. The Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program, which is a very comprehensive phased program which includes not just the soldiers but the family members as well. The Chaplains Corps has a wonderful program called Strong Bonds, which addresses couples relationships, and it also has extended itself to single soldiers as well to help them cope with their interpersonal relationships in life. And finally, there are plenty of programs on installations that support soldiers who are transitioning. But what you may not know is that for Reserve and Guard individuals, because they don't necessarily live on or near an installation, they have to seek out resources in their communities. And in the Army Reserve, as well as the National Guard, we have set up either virtual portals where they can receive information if they need help, as well as some hard sites in different states and localities to provide counseling, assistance with transition into civilian employment, as well as other resources to help them connect with their community and their former or a new employer, if their former employer is no longer in business, to find them employment opportunities. So there are a lot of resources available. We still have a long way to go because, as I mentioned, particularly for the Reserve and Guard, not being on or near an installation can add another dimension to that effort to reintegrate. And with that, I will yield to the next speaker.
Thank you, General Anderson. Mr. Brock?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and I'm very happy to be involved in this particular symposium. I need to preface a couple of comments. One is, first of all, I want to thank or congratulate you all. This is National Women's History Month, so this is an appropriate time to have this function. And the broader issues of dealing with women veterans and veterans in general, drills down to a lot of different areas. And my background has always been employment, training and employment, vocational rehabilitation, disability issues, and other issues. But before I talk about a couple of those issues, I want to just give you a little heads up. I worked for the Department of Labor for about 8.5 years, but prior to that, I was on a 4-year weekend. I retired in 1998 from DAV and took a 4-year weekend, and then, and then went to work for Department of Labor. But when I started to work for Department of Labor, I also concurrently started to lose my hearing. So now I'm wearing two hearing aids, and thanks to the VA, I can hear pretty good in some venues. This is not a good venue for me. Because of the high ceilings and everything. So if you ask me a question, or if I've been talking with you, I may not hear you. But it was a perfect setting for me to work for the federal government, because when I got a chance to speak, I could always use that as an excuse that, I'm here from the federal government and your comments and questions will fall on deaf ears. So I'll try not to be, since you have a mixture of people here today. But, I think one of the big issues that we're talking about today, one other thing. I was wounded in 1967, And the Vietnam women that are here, the women that served in Vietnam, thank you very much. I got wounded in May of '67 and got medevaced immediately to the, at Chu Lai is where I got wounded. But that was before the general was there. She's a lot younger than I am. But, you know, I obviously got well taken care of at the field hospital and then forward to Clark Air Force Base and then on to Walter Reed. But let me talk about a couple of issues. One, I think one of the biggest issues that are facing veterans today, and including women veterans, is the transition process. You know, we spend a lot of money, we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of effort to train our men and women when they go into the military. We're doing very little on the other end when they're getting out during the transition process. By law, service members are supposed to get the transition assistance program 1 year out before discharge, and for those that are going to be retiring are supposed to get it 2 years out. Typically, they get it 90 days out, and it's kind of a rush job. One of the things that I worked on when I was at the Department of Labor and even with DAV is the TAP program, the Transition Assistance Program. And one of the areas in the TAP program is the 2.5-day employment workshop. The 2.5-day employment workshop has just been revamped, and they're putting it back out onto the street in a different format. But historically, it was basically 200 PowerPoints, and somebody would get up before the class and click, click, click. And it was all pretty much by rote. The individual was not permitted to really inject any anecdotes or any of his or her own personality. It was just PowerPoint, PowerPoint. And the former Assistant Secretary of Labor, before he took a look at revamping it, you know, he called it death by PowerPoint.
And at that
So anyway,
note,
that's being changed. But one of the problems that service members have in the whole transition process is the translation of their military skills into the civilian labor force. And I know there's quite a few employers here, and I think a lot of them would agree with me that reading that resume, you know, how does that individual get their resume to the top of the pile if it's in military language and not in civilian language?
All
in many cases,
outstanding
it doesn't even
comments.
get in the pile. Oh,
All
I'm up.
outstanding
Okay,
comments.
thank you. I'll be around.
It's so interesting when we get so excited in our issues that we have to beat people over the head. But thank you very much. Very good comments, and we'll be looking forward to your questions. Sergeant Major Pritchard.
Good morning. Hooah! Hoorah! For my Marine friends. Air power for my Air Force friends, and sea power for my Navy friends. I speak coming from the position of having just retired 2 years ago and making that transition. I had the opportunity to deploy twice while on active duty. Once to Somalia, where I came back home as part of a unit and was transitioned back as part of a process. Though in 1993, it's a whole lot different because the Army is a learning organization. We did it okay back then, but we have truly evolved to the programs that are much, much more beneficial to our soldiers coming home. And then I came home from Afghanistan after 2 years as an individual. Nobody there to meet me when I got off the plane. I had to rent a car, had to go find my place to live and all that. Now, I'm a Command Sergeant Major, so I have a little bit more wherewithal than the individual reservist or National Guard soldier that comes home. So the programs that the General talked about are all out there, but the challenge is getting soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines to use them. Because what happens is when they come home, they're very excited. They hear about them, they're in those briefings, and where's it going? It's going in this ear and out that, because they only have one focus, and that's to get home. And the challenges that manifest themselves don't come immediately on that high from coming home and wanting to be with family. It comes maybe a week later, it comes maybe months later, it comes maybe years later. And then as they transition out of the service, they have the other challenges. And I'm fortunate that I serve on a board of directors called Tampa Crossroads in Tampa that focuses on homeless women veterans. And that is a rising problem. And how do you help those women? And when they get out there, when you ask them about what programs did they know about, it was, well, I remember hearing something about it. They don't identify themselves, as veterans, so sometimes they won't go to the VA, whether they served 3 years or 20 years. So it's how do you get this information out and bring them in to understand that there are plenty of places out there. So it's how do we get the word out, and that's, I think, the challenge but it is also an opportunity where employers can help, not just the VA, where communities can help, and how do we get those information to those volunteer organizations that can also help our veterans. Employers are doing a good job. As I mentioned earlier, I sit on the board of J.P. Morgan Chase, who focuses on employment, housing for veterans. So there are a lot of organizations and companies that want to do a lot of great things. It's how do we leverage them to help us? Because there's so much out there and there's so much information, people just don't know where to go and bring it in. And I experienced that, but the thing in organizations like this, sessions like this, networking is the key. And teaching people how to do that and rely on that is something that we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Major Pritchard. And now on to Ms. Wilkerson, Sergeant Wilkerson.
Good morning, everyone. Make sure this works. First of all, I'd like to say thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor to sit up here with these distinguished individuals. I hope that everyone's transition into civilian life is as easy as mine was. I was released from active duty in 2001. I had injured my knee and was put out medically. From there were several different types of employment that I seeked out, but I found my home with Home Depot. They are based on core values like the Marine Corps. Honor, courage, and commitment is the Marine Corps' values. The Home Depot has a whole bunch of values of their own. It's the company culture. They understand the military and the veterans. Right now, there's 35,000 veterans that work at Home Depot, and about 1,500 of our associates are on active duty at any given time. We also have a lot of military spouses who work in our stores. The president of our Western Division is a former Marine, and many of our other division managers and store managers are also previous military. My district manager, in fact, is also former Air Force. The Home Depot Foundation is focused on the housing needs of deserving veterans and wounded warriors. In fact, last year the foundation made a $30 million donation over a 3-year period to focus on improving the homes and facilities where veterans live and are served. From a personal perspective, if there was one main point I could make today about how to transition successfully back into your home life and back into your work life, it would be to just take it one day at a time. It's not easy. The military doesn't prepare you for civilian life. It's a challenge every single day. And being released in 2001, I still face those challenges on a daily basis. And if there was one recommendation I could make to families welcoming their loved ones home, it would be to just be patient with them. You know, it's not easy to transition. Just be there for them. That's the best that you can do. Okay, thank you.
Well, outstanding comments. Thank you, Amy, and thank you all of our panelists. I understand that our fire drill has been, we've been given a waiver, so we're back to our original plan. We'll find out at 10:30 if the bell rings and they come and make us leave. So what we're going to do now is move into a few minutes of Q&A. We have time for a few questions. I'd like to wrap up, though, what we've heard here. You've heard from people inside the military. You've heard from folks who have fought for veterans, people who were veterans, different experiences. And as you can see, and most of you already know, this transition time is challenging. If the law or the rules or the guidance, regulations say we should have 2 years, what does that mean to me as an individual when life changes on a daily basis? What does it mean to a reservist who might be mobilized for a year or 8 months? That 2-year time frame doesn't quite work. And even a 1-year time frame doesn't always work. My daughter was an Air Force captain in Iraq, and I would frequently get phone calls from her. That's the good news and different from Vietnam, that we could call home. But she would tell me, "Mom, you don't understand." And I thought, I do understand. A lot of things haven't changed that much. But some things have, and we're moving forward. We have 14% of the active duty force is women now. 14%. There's a statistic out there that says anything over 14%, then you become no longer a minority. Wouldn't that be interesting? So let me open it to questions. Do I see anything out there? Yes, ma'am. Do we have a mic? Yeah, mic is coming. Try it again.
U.S. Army retired, and I have a question for the panel. Everything, when we talk about transitioning, seems to focus on transitioning into an already existing job market. And yet the statistics you hear say that small business in America seems to be what's furnishing all of the new jobs, the most jobs. What is available for me transitioning out of the service if I want to create my own business, set up a home business, start a new business? What's out there to set that up? I haven't heard anything addressed in that vein.
Anybody on the panel care to comment?
I can speak to that. This is General Anderson. There's a couple of programs out there. One that General Horoho had and I were honored at last week. It's called VWISE, and I cannot remember the actual meaning of the acronym, but it's in partnership with the Small Business Administration and Syracuse University. And their intent is to help women who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs. And they have a two-track program, one for beginners who have an idea that they want to develop, and they also have an advanced track for women who already have started a business but who want to improve and increase their capabilities. So that is only one example I know of organizations that are trying to develop women as entrepreneurs. And this was a wonderful event that we both attended. And I actually met a homeless woman veteran at this event who was so motivated that she had somehow found her way to this meeting in Florida so she could gain the skills to start her own business. So that's only one example that I can think of. I'm not sure there may be others that people in the audience are aware of.
And I can speak as a small business owner myself. There are an awful lot of resources out there from the Small Business Administration to take a look at how they can help anybody transition from a good idea into a business. We also have a procurement technical assistance, PTAP, I hate acronyms that I can't remember, that offers assistance in developing a capability to sell your services back to the government. So we'll take it under advisement that I think that's a very good topic to add to our symposium for next year. Any further comments out of the audience?
I'm Brigadier General Belinda Pinckney, recently retired from the United States Army as well. And that fact is true. VWISE is the only program that I know that's out there as well. I'll be going out to look at the program and hopefully participate in it in August. I am also a small business owner. And being such, I'm telling you, the issue is not necessarily starting a small business. There's all kinds of support out there for that. The issue is past performance. Coming out of the military, we don't have past performance, and it's hard to get past performance. So if you don't have past performance coupled with the certificates, then you're not going to get any contracts. So in addition to getting the entrepreneurial experience, getting the certifications, they are not easy to do. They're very time consuming, but there are a lot of people out there that can help you in that area. But to me, as a business owner, the biggest challenge is past performance. And they do have mentor protege programs. If someone is willing to give you the opportunity, I'm currently in one, and that works as well.
Great comments. I would add on past performance that the primary way to get that activity is to work with another company, with a larger company, and be part of that. Right, exactly. And those types of opportunities are available, and again, it might be a good opportunity for us to look into some of those to highlight them in the future. Next question, please.
Thank you. My name is Patrice Martel-Gator from Volunteers of America, and we've been providing services to veterans since World War I. Ms. Pritchard, you said something that was just stunning, and we see this in our work. You said that women who have served in the military, served our country, do not think of themselves as veterans and do not seek the services and supports that are available to them. I would like to ask, do you all have any ideas about how we can make it so that women, while still deployed, while still in the military, will think of themselves as veterans and seek out the services and supports that many of you have referenced and that are there to help them transition personally and economically?
Good question.
Well, I can tell you that when I used to talk to my soldiers, especially those that would be transitioning in and out, if I'd have office calls to remind them of the services that they are provided. We don't know what the dynamic is why women don't identify themselves as veterans. So in working with J.P. Morgan Chase, one of the things we did was figure out how to ask the question differently. So we asked the question, did you ever serve in the military, on their job application? So that gets a check yes, which then leads to a bunch of other questions, as opposed to, are you a veteran? And they don't self-identify. I can't tell you what the reason is. And that's, you know, I even had a friend of mine that's a retired Sergeant Major and was having some challenges, and I said, well, did you go to the VA? Well, you know, and part of it is the horror stories of the past, you know that reputation that the administration has gotten has just carried over where, well, I'm not going to get it anyway, so it's why bother? You know, and so it's getting people to change their mindset that was then, this is now. And I have to credit the services, and to include the VA, and the great job that Secretary Shinseki has done as being a learning organization and figuring out how to reach out, listen to what people are saying, and take those changes. So one is that when you encounter somebody, you know, I always wear my lapel pin that says I'm an Army retiree, and I want people to ask me about that pin. And I want to talk about my service, and a lot of people don't want to talk about their service. We're kind of starting to see people go back into their shell where when you have incidences like just what happened in Afghanistan, where a soldier has gone off and done a very horrific act, that translates back into the psyche of the American public, unfortunately. So then it's a double-edged sword being a veteran today and serving in 2 wars that have gone on for over 10 years, serving very honorably, but we all get painted with the brush of the worst as opposed to the brush of the best. So that becomes a double-edged sword, I think, for employers to say, well, you know, this guy served in Afghanistan, 2 deployments. This young lady served in Iraq, 3 deployments, Afghanistan. And then you get all this stuff about, you know, post-traumatic stress. I mean, it becomes a double-edged sword. Well, is this somebody I want to hire or not? I mean, so those are some of the reasons people won't identify themselves as a veteran, because they don't want to get painted with that brush of the negativity of, you know, well, they have PTSD, or they're going to go do like what just happened. So it's a challenge, and it's part of it is educating the employer about what's out there. And a little caveat: my sister is a small business, and she employed a Marine veteran. She was actually the HR manager for a small business, and he had some challenges, a young staff sergeant, getting out. Well, the president wanted to fire him. So my sister calls me and says, you know, I got this young Marine that just got out, and he's having some challenges. So I said, I want you to go ask these series of questions. And she got him his help, because she said, you know, you just don't give up on them because they're having some challenges when they first get there. So my sister's never served, would never even think of serving. But she respected my service and understood that, you know, that you got to reach out and help them up. You just can't throw them away. Because as she said to her boss, you either can help him now, or you're going to be the one complaining about him because he's on welfare or some other program that you're paying for anyway. My sister's very blunt. So I think that's the other thing employers have to learn, is that you just can't cast them aside. You have a responsibility to help nurture and mentor them and help them transition and find the help that they need, because part of it they just don't know.
Amy, do you have a comment, being the junior member of our panel?
The only thing that I can say is I did get a medical discharge from the Marine Corps. Upon going into the civilian workforce, I was looked down upon because of a medical discharge. So I kind of got to the point where I started just putting that I had gotten an active discharge to try to find employment, because people were passing me over for employment. So I don't think it's the military that's lacking to give people the information they need. I think it's actually the civilian workforce that isn't educated on the policies and procedures in the military. That's my thought on the process.
Great comment. Another question out there, please?
Hi, my name is Danny Coblet, and I am from the civilian sector, and I happen to deal with two particular niches right now, women, professional women, as well as returning vets. And just to go back to the issue that you had about women's special needs transitioning, I'm going to posit that what's happening here is not necessarily a military woman's issue. I think it's a women's issue, and it transcends just military. It's women in politics, it's women in academia, it's women in business. There's a reluctance to find their voice, and I think that's what you're talking about when you say that women are not comfortable saying that they're vets. Women in business are uncomfortable saying that they did a great job. Women in academia are uncomfortable saying they deserve tenure. There's just a thing that transcends. So if we're talking about transition, my whole thing is I'd like to start breaking down these silos just in the way we think about the issue. And it's not just military women, it's women sort of across the board. And we deploy our own energies much more efficiently if instead of reinventing the wheel, we capitalize on what's already been accomplished in all of these other spheres. So I just put that out there as a way to sort of reorient the thinking, change the mindset a little bit, and see if we can think of this in the broader issue of how do we equip women to understand their value, speak up for their value, because you talk about 14% in the civilian sector, particularly in male-dominated industries, the number of women at the top is 17%, despite the fact that they come in at parity. So there's something going on generally with women, and it's not just military women. So that should be a little comforting in knowing that there is a bigger population. And just also in terms of entrepreneurship, there are tons of resources out there for women, for civilian women, in terms of going into business. And I encourage women vets who are looking to establish small businesses and become entrepreneurs to make use of this as well, because it's not just military teaching military. Civilians have a lot to offer in this area as well. And again, don't reinvent the wheel. There are women doing it every day. And part of the issue is with military mindset is I keep hearing about the certifications. If you're an entrepreneur, sometimes you just have to go for it. You have to be a little stupid and just reach for it. And that's true. That's what being an entrepreneur, I mean, obviously you weigh risk, but there's a real military mindset about really educating, being 100% prepared, particularly for women. That can be like a girl trap, because it's like we're never going to be 100%, we're never going to be perfect. Sometimes perfection is the enemy of the good, and we just have to go for it. So thank you.
Well, great comments. I think we have time for one more question. There's one down front here. Oh, sir. But I would offer that I think you're right on that there are some issues with women, and that's why we are here. It is an Army issue. It is a woman's issue. We happen to be focused on women in the Army, but that's what makes it a little bit different, is it's beyond the Army. It is a woman's issue. So I applaud your comments, and we are talking about change and transition. Question down front, please.
My name is Gene Clark. I'm from Drexel University. I spent the last 40 years helping veterans and reservists coming home and making that transition. My field, obviously, is education. I've known Ron's work for over 40 years and have looked at a lot of DevOps and people that have come through our programs. In a guide that I wrote for parents for the Our Community Salutes program, we talked to parents about what mandatory education is in the military and about what voluntary education is in the military. And I would say to you that today, TAP and DTAP are mandatory. For most cases, the commanders are obliged to have their soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines go through those transition programs. But in effect, they're voluntary, and they start too late. We tell young recruits that their transition to succeed is based on their ability to compete. Often, we see them on the college campus a year or so after they've separated because they can't compete.
Outstanding thoughts. Drexel's always been a great supporter of our transition. I just was on a panel looking at some of those issues, and those are the critical things that businesses are looking for. But I think it also goes back to an education of the civilian workforce to understand that that's what we bring. So it's on both sides, both the military and the civilian community. Amy points out how Home Depot recognized her value, but Home Depot has a very good awareness of what military skills we bring. So perhaps it's up to us to help educate the civilian community as to those values and then take responsibility ourselves to be able to articulate those values in such a way that those that don't understand us in the military can recognize what we bring to bear. I want to take this opportunity to thank our panel. Thank you very much. And our panel will be available for a longer question and answering session after the next panel.